Grab your favorite caffeinated beverage and get cozy because you are listening to Mindful as a Mother with Paige Bruce and Lindsay Adams.
Do you want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and even earn money, all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, like I am right now. So no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. We're in the top 99 of parenting podcasts on Apple Podcasts. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. And when you want to take conversations with your fans to the next level, you can input Q&A and polls to get them talking. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, it's totally free, with no catch. Ever since I discovered Spotify for Podcasters, I've been able to record episodes with more creativity, more flow, and so much easier. I highly recommend you give it a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started.
Hey, Lindsay here. The thing that gives me the most anxiety about raising my son is the fear that the world will try to force him to conform and become someone who is neurotypical passing. That's why in our home, we do everything we can to support him in just being his best self. If he needs to stim, you got it, buddy. If he's having a sensory meltdown, let's cocoon and cancel our plans. Being his best self means trusting himself in a world that will tell him being himself is wrong. That freaking breaks my heart for him. That fear used to paralyze me, but now it just empowers me to fight harder to change how we view and approach neurodiversity as parents. If I can give him a strong enough foundation of self-worth, he will be resilient and brave enough to be himself. That's what I wish for my child, your child, and every child on this earth, regardless of their neurotype. And that's why we created Responsive Parenting Your Neurodivergent Child, the video series. In this series, we break down how to determine your child's unique needs and how to parent them from a responsive approach rather than an approach that's focused on behavior and punishment. Because instead of trying to fit these kids into the world, we need to make their world work for them. And this course will show you how to do it. It's $20. Check out the link in our show notes. This podcast is not intended to be a substitute for therapy or the therapeutic relationship, and the information given in this podcast is purely for educational purposes and is not intended to replace the advice of a professional. Hello and welcome back to Mindful as a Mother. My name is Lindsay Adams and I'm here with
Paige. Hi, everybody.
And we are still on our podcast night. How many episodes have we recorded? This is our 7th episode in like 12 hours, guys.
Yep.
Maybe not 12 hours.
Yeah, because it would have been 3 a.m. But within the last 24 hours, we have done 6 episodes, 1 outline, lots of content, and got a hearty night's sleep.
Yeah, we're doing it. And I'm super excited about this episode because I think it's going to be really useful for both parents about themselves and then also with children. So this episode will be focused on yourself as an adult and how you can be aware of the emotional ladder and, you know, how emotions work in correlation with your ADHD. And then once you have an understanding of that, it is easier to apply to your child.
Yeah, and there are a lot of different versions of this. I think just in understanding emotions in general. And this one is specific to like neurospicy experience. And I believe the author of the book we're working through, Your Brain's Not Broken, Strategies for Navigating Your Emotions in Life with ADHD by Tamara Rosier, PhD. I believe she actually coined with a partner this specific model of the ladder.
Oh, that's cool. Okay. Because it's very much like a zones of regulation to me.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I feel like. But it's very specific for, and this is helpful and translate well into, like, where is your child's nervous system at in correlation with, like, their ADHD? Where's your own nervous system at in correlation with ADHD? Because it's so intertwined and there's so much crossover. But I really like it because it's a specific way to understand it for neurospicy individuals.
Yes.
So first, let's talk about, like, what is the emotional ladder. So picture this. A ladder has different rungs on it, and there are five different rungs. So at the very top, we have present and calm. Right below that, we have attending to. Level 3 is like autopilot. 4 is survival, and 5 is delusional. So, Paige, do you think we should start in the middle, or do you want to start at the top? I kind of like a top down.
Yeah, I was going to say it makes more sense to me to structure it from the top
In the book, they do it. If you do read the book, they structure it. They start by teaching on the middle because that's where people spend the most time. And then it's like the 2 healthier versions are above the middle, and the 2 like warning sign, red alert versions are below the middle. And so keep that in mind, but we're going to start from the top down. So present and calm is the top. And what does someone look like? What do you feel like when you're in present and calm?
Present and calm for me is less tension in my body.
Mm-hmm.
I feel well rested. I have energy. I'm generally joyful.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm pretty happy, like bopping through life. More patient, like I'm triggered less, so like less emotional reactivity, easier to focus.
Mm-hmm. And this is like the zone, like when you're in a regulated space, when you think of like the zones of regulation, this is that piece. Like, and for me, it's like I'm flexible and I'm adaptable. So if a challenge arises, it's not a big deal. I don't get emotionally activated by it. Mm-hmm. I just deal with it in the moment and move on. I'm also able to be like easily motivated to do the things that I know that I need to do. And the important thing I think that she points out is that in each phase of the ladder, our emotional voice in our head is louder or softer. Mm-hmm. And in this phase, and I resonate with this a lot in myself, my emotional voice is there, but it's like a guide. Like I hear it in the background, but it's not something that's like screaming at me or influencing my decisions as much.
Another thing I really like about this one is we talk about awareness in general and how when we are not in this level 1 present and calm state, our brain is in some way seeking out danger, and it'll focus on what it feels like is the highest threat. So something that I see a lot is the interpretation of like even neutral stuff, like, hey, how's it going, as like a personal attack, right? Like, well, they just want to know how I'm doing because they want something from me, right? And we see this a lot in like black and white thinking, anytime your nervous system is lit up. So this one, when I think about it, it's like, oh, someone doesn't respond to my invitation, or like I'm like, hey, do you want to hang out? And they're like, no, I can't, but with no explanation, right? When I'm present and calm, then I can accept that as like, oh, okay, sounds good. They must have other things going on. Like I am able to be empathetic and curious and take on other perspectives, versus when I'm lit up, I know then I'm like, they don't want to be my friend anymore. Like they don't want to hang out with me. I must have done something wrong. I should ask them, like all kinds of stuff like that.
Yeah. And so just being aware of that, and being aware of like that your nervous system state really does impact how you view the world. And you will see a difference in your like assumptions about where people are coming from, and if you make assumptions or if you can approach it from a curious state. The other thing too is like, for me, being able to tell which state I'm in is how well self-talk works for me. So like correcting my self-talk, or like, so if I'm in level 1 or 2, I have a thought like, oh, using your example, maybe they don't like me. And then I'm able to say, oh no, actually, I know this is going on with them. They're probably just busy, like, and be more curious. Mm-hmm. And if that works, and if my emotional mind accepts that and I can move on, then I know that I'm in those like more regulated spaces. But if it doesn't work or I'm unable to do that, that's when I know. And this is with yourself and with your kids too, like, because when you're in fight or flight, your logic and reasoning goes off board. So if you can logic and reason, then you likely are in
some kind of calm state.
Yeah.
The thing I like about her ladder specifically, she talks about ADHD symptoms in relation to each one. So she says, like, you still have symptoms at this stage, but you're much more mindfully aware of them. It's much easier to use those tasks and tips and hacks that we've discussed before. You have more problem-solving capabilities when it comes to those experiencing those symptoms.
And this is why we say that nervous system regulation is the root of everything, right?
The root of everything.
Because if you can regulate your nervous system, then you can use all the tips and tricks and on all of those things.
Yes.
Okay, the next rung on the ladder is attending to. What does that look like?
Ooh, that's a good question. So right under 1, we're on 2. So I'm still somewhat regulated, and I can do most things without becoming emotionally overwhelmed. I can delay the emotional voice. And have non-reactive moments. But it's a little more of a push and pull. Like, it takes a little more effort.
And this is where, like, from a nervous system regulation piece, like, if you feel yourself being more in a push and pull, it's taking more energy to stay calm, to stay regulated. This is when it's really important to like take some time to support your nervous system, use a skill, do something to reset, because it's so much harder once you move down to that third rung of survival mode or autopilot is 3 autopilot? Yeah, to autopilot to then use a skill and get out of it. So recognizing that, like, okay, I'm maybe not fully in ease and flow, right? I am in, like, it's a little bit difficult, but I can see that it's starting to get difficult.
Yeah. And one thing that she mentions in the book that I really appreciate is this is where I recognize things as an obstacle or a problem, and I'm able to make a note of it to solve later or to ask for help and then keep going.
Yeah.
Instead of just automatically starting to spiral or panic or, again, like move into yellow and then red of like avoiding it for so long.
And for me personally, like if I'm rigid, that is how I know I'm not regulated. So like if I'm flexible and adaptable, I know that I'm doing a good job of taking care of my nervous system and staying in a regulated state.
Yeah. So with ADHD symptoms in level 2, they are identified. They're causing more of a problem for you. It's difficult. Maybe we're trying to do the dishes and get ready for work at the same time.
That's me.
But we can identify it, and then we are able to access and use strategies and techniques to manage those. And it takes a little more like careful work and consistency, but we're able to access and use those. Like acknowledge, access, and use them. Okay, I'm struggling a little bit. This is what it is. I'm going to do this.
And it's so important.
Versus like level 1, you're not really struggling. You're just like living your life.
Yeah. I wish we could be in level 1 all the time, but that's just not realistic.
I wish we could too. Most of our time is not in level 1.
Most of our time is in actually level 3, which is autopilot. And autopilot looks like just kind of doing the things without being aware or like mindful or present in the moment.
Impulsive decisions, solving problems immediately. Like I need an immediate solution, but you're not able to like use any kind of problem solving or strategies to come up with how to solve the problem.
Yeah, or it's like feeling like something needs to be solved immediately, but it actually doesn't need to be solved immediately. Like you can just wait till later.
Yes. And you can feel the fight or flight response, like that stress response in your body. So your heart rate has increased. Maybe your body's more tense. I kind of think about it when you said that you used to do this when you went camping. Like you would go on autopilot because you know all the things you need to pack and do, but you're not mindfully aware of like how it's impacting you or how you're moving through it.
Yeah, and it's going from like task to task to task without stopping, without thinking, without taking a moment. You just do the things, and it's a little bit like a tornado. Like whatever's in your way, you're irritable with. Like if someone stops you and interrupts you, if there's a challenge, like I'm irritated with this.
Yes. And so with ADHD symptoms, what she says is when you can tell that you're on autopilot because you're not thoughtfully using the strategies and things that you've already determined to be supportive. Mm-hmm. You're just waiting for the fire and then putting out the fire as they show up. Mm-hmm. And this is a struggle because when we already have a differently wired brain, we struggle with the executive function, like sequencing, like doing steps 1, 2, 3 in order, or short-term memory, or like intense emotions regardless. And then you add in the piece where your nervous system is lit up, so you're more reactive. Mm-hmm. Your short-term memory is even more unreliable, and you are so focused on like just fixing things immediately that you're defaulting to some of those like toxic patterns or self-sabotaging patterns that we mentioned before.
Mm-hmm. And you're almost like not aware of it because you're on autopilot. Like there's no awareness that like this is what I'm doing until usually either someone points it out to you or you like have been aware enough for long enough that you recognize it.
Yes. And you can tell because your emotions, when you're identifying emotions, they'll be more focused on avoidance, anxiety, and stress than like calm and peace or happy or joy, anything like that. And I think this one is important too because this is when I mentioned earlier when you're in 1 and 2, you have more perspective of others. When you're in 3, you don't. It is very normal for the brain to become more self-centered because you're worried about your survival and getting your way. That's just the way the brain is wired. And so it can impact the relationships and people around you to just be existing in autopilot because you are more like self-centered about getting what you need and how you are interpreting things.
Okay, the next one is survival. And this is like full on fight or flight. This is not the low level fight or flight. This is my brain is purely focused on me surviving and everything is perceived as a threat.
Yep. We're frantic. We're on high alert. We have a lot of difficulty adapting and learning. We don't sleep well. You might gain or lose unhealthy weight. So like all of these have physical consequences also, which I think is interesting, which is just the nervous system, which is why we talk about that. But it's like that we're talking chronic illness, right? We're existing in survival for so long that now our body is responding and we're sick and we're self-centered again and we're very critical of others. So this is a very black and white situation. I remember an example of a meme I shared, and I have someone close to me in my life that I know is having a very stressful time. And, you know, sometimes as a therapist or a counselor, you just know too much. But so I shared this meme that was like, if someone's mad at you, it's not your responsibility to figure out why. It's their responsibility to ask you and bring it up. Otherwise, it's not your business, which I do fully believe. I'm like, if there is an issue, then like I'm open to having conversations and knowing, of course, but I'm not going to speculate and like ruminate on it. And they reacted. The reaction emoji was like the shock face to that to me. And I was like, oh, unfortunately, I know a lot about their life. I was like, they're in a stress state right now.
They
like,
misinterpreted
that as a personal attack.
Yeah. And I think that happens so often on social media, right? Like people, and you see that, which is why people, even I look at our comment section on Facebook. Facebook's the worst about trolls, guys.
With trolls. Some of the best people are there, but also
the worst.
The most trolls.
Yeah. But some people aren't just, so there's like the troll that's just out there being a troll, right? And then there's the person that's well-intentioned, and you can tell they are in this survival state, right? Like in the way they talk about their child, the way they talk about us and to us and about our information, you can tell that it is survival and they are perceiving everything as a threat. Like the example I'll use is in one of my videos, I talked about there being no truth in the now when it comes to our thoughts when we're emotionally loaded. And I had all these people comment like, and I probably did not explain it in the best way because I also have ADHD, and sometimes with these big concepts, I have a hard time making them taking even right now what's going on in my brain and expressing it through my words. And so that probably happened as well. But there were some people who misinterpreted the comment and said, well, it's gaslighting your kids to tell them that there's no truth in the now. And I never said to tell them that, actually. I just said that, like, recognizing as a parent that, like, their thoughts are going to change based on their state or their emotions. And other people in the comments are trying to, like, explain it and defend me. And then these people cannot see it outside of that. And that's where I'm like, okay, this person is in survival. They're well-intentioned. And yeah, they have a point. We don't want to gaslight kids about our feelings. But they took one sentence from a 3-minute video and picked it apart and decided to, like, bash me on Facebook Reels. And to me, that's like the signal, like, okay, we're hypervigilant. We're like,
yeah,
you know, and so you just see it in how people show up online too. And it's interesting. 100%. And now that we've talked about it, you guys are going to notice it everywhere. And that's why it's so important too. Like, if anyone's ever read The 4 Agreements, it's a great book. Have you read it? But it's just like 4 rules for, like, living an emotionally healthy life. And one is, like, don't personalize anything. And this is so true. Like,
it's so true.
When someone's saying that to me, my first reaction is to, like, personalize it and let it affect me emotionally. Like, oh yeah, maybe I'm not, like, sharing valuable information, or maybe I am telling people to gaslight their kids. And I have to step out of that and be like, whoa. And that's where I'm at in my emotional ladder. It depends on how I'm able to receive that, right? Because if I'm at the top, I'm able to say, like, no, this person is clearly having a hard time and they're doing the best they can and they misinterpreted that one line, right? But when I'm not, then it's like, oh, maybe I am a terrible, damaging therapist.
Yes, and it depends on where you're at.
Yeah.
And so with ADHD symptoms out of 4 survival, we are constantly putting out fires. So it's almost like we're in constant crisis or chaos. We're irritable, frustrated, poor concentration. So it's like all of your symptoms are even more exaggerated the more dysregulated your nervous system becomes. And that's true for a lot of reasons, but we already struggle with executive function, which is in the prefrontal cortex. And when you are lit up in the stress response, your prefrontal cortex is shut down. It's like, no, I'm on vacation. And so it makes sense that when you're in survival, our primary goal is safety and assessing danger. And so you don't need concentration. You don't need to recall something you've learned. You don't need to remember something that you said 2 minutes ago or where you put that, because that's not life or death. This person on Facebook is life or death.
Yeah, and it's, for me, like, I can tell when I'm in this state by how I am feeling like I need to constantly be checking. So even, and this boils down to social media. So when I was in this state and I was getting these comments, and I've also gotten these comments in a more regulated state, and it's when then I become like, I'm constantly refreshing to see if anyone else has commented. That's when I know I'm in this state, because I'm scanning for danger. I'm scanning for danger. I'm scanning for danger, right? And being aware of that's like, okay, I need to put my phone down. I need to do something to regulate. And it's really just, like, helpful to be aware of that. So it can also be like, maybe you're texting a friend and you're waiting for them to reply and you're checking your phone. That's scanning for danger, right? Yeah. Like, and so being aware of how that shows up in our modern world, because back in the olden days, like when we were kid, people scanning for danger meant looking for bears, pretty much. You know what I mean? And now it's different.
Yeah. And one of those is our phone. Or checking our email, or seeking feedback and validation from the people around us.
Refreshing to see if anything new's happened with the Ocean Gate. I went into that for like a while.
Yes.
It was,
and that makes sense, because that is a communal tragedy.
Well, and all this happened at the same time. So, like, for me, it was like I was already heightened, and then, like, it just transferred over, right? So in my attempt at coping, I was drinking Diet Coke before we recorded, which was probably not the best attempt at coping, and I wasn't able to see that because I was in survival at the moment, was, okay, well, instead of refreshing my feed to see if anyone else has commented mean shit about me and my profession, maybe I should refresh my feed to see if anything has happened with Ocean Gate. So it's like I replace the behavior to something a little bit more healthy. And sometimes it goes like this. And then I realize, like, oh, this is still creating anxiety. It's just different because it's not personal anxiety. And then I was able to, like, transition out of that to, like, okay, I'm just going to take a phone break.
Yeah. Yes, I love that.
So it's like, that's climbing the ladder, right?
Yeah.
Like, in a slow way.
Yeah, but you have to build the self-awareness first.
Okay, what's the last one?
Delusional.
I love being delusional. I'm just kidding.
So delusional, she frames it as delusional because she believes that at this stage you are out of touch with reality. You're uncontrollable, unreasonable, willing to destroy others and ourselves. And our mind's obsessions completely take over.
Yeah.
And I'm like trying to think of a time when I was delusional. But so let's talk ADHD symptoms. You're emotionally volatile. You're constantly in crisis or chaos, and the people around you are the enemy, and you're willing to do anything, destroy those relationships or anything about those people, and even yourself, to survive, basically.
I call this like the I don't care phase. Like, it's just like you don't care about others, you don't care about yourself. Like, and when something happens, it's just like, I don't care. Yes. I don't care. Like, or even with your own behaviors, like, because sometimes you see your behaviors and how they impact other people. And in this phase, it's like, I don't even care how it impacts you in this moment. I don't even care how it impacts me in this moment.
Yeah. You're still going to do the thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you are overly sensitive and oftentimes oppositional.
Yeah.
I always like to talk about the relation to others when we're at this stage, because when you are at this stage, you don't recognize your relation to others because you don't care. So I like to bring it up now while we're all calm and regulated, maybe in a 2. But your relation to others, you can be really clingy because you never want to be without, or you can be really distant and critical. And we often project our frustrations and anger with ourselves and what's happening, like the stresses around us, onto other people. And we place blame.
Yeah. And so the signpost you might want to look for is if you're constantly complaining or blaming other people for what's going on in your life, your circumstances, and it's in a I am the victim mentality, that's when you maybe want to look at, especially relationally, right? Because in relationships, any relationship, there is a part you contribute to a dynamic, even if it's enabling the dynamic, right? Like, so, but if it's if you feel like something is 100% someone else's fault, then you maybe want to look at, like, do I need to regulate before I deal with this conflict?
Yes. And I think it's important to point out that we travel up and down this ladder and exist in different states of this ladder at different points, even during our day. It's not like you're at a 1 or a 2 all day for 24 hours, or you're living at a 5 for 7 days. You can travel up and down this ladder at different points during your day. So I have moments where I'm in a 5 and I'm like, okay, so I recognized that after a while that was my pattern. Like, getting home from work, if my husband was there and my kids were there, I'm walking in the house, I didn't give myself a window to transition. I'm in a 5 at this point. And I recognize that things that don't normally bother me are bothering me a lot. And I would start making comments like, wow, the house is so messy. What did you do all day? Are you just sitting there? Like, wow, I didn't even wash the dishes and you were home all day. Like, how come you, like, okay, so I'm just going to get off work and I'm going to make dinner, even though, like, everyone was here and available to make something for themselves, like stuff like that. And I was like, okay. So the first thing I did was shut my mouth. I practiced a lot not saying things out loud because I'm recognizing, like, I have difficulty with transitions in general. That is one of my ADHD symptoms. Transitions are hard. It doesn't matter who's home or what was done. If I walk in the door after work, I need like a 15 or 20 minute window to regulate myself. And it doesn't matter what's happening around me. And so then I recognize that I'm at a 5 when I walk in the door and my husband and kids are going to be home. If no one's home, it's easier for me because there's not a lot of stuff happening around me. And then I regulate and then I move on. But it's like I already walk into them running around and talking or playing or whatever, and it's stimulating. So then I'm already at like maybe a 4 when I walk in, and then stimulated immediately. So I drop down to a 5. And so I was like, okay, I'm really placing blame on my partner and my kids or other people that I'm close to in my life during this little window. And it's happening a lot. So then I recognized it was damaging my relationships with them each time I was getting off work. And so then I was able to like, okay, but before that I wasn't at a 4 or a 5, right? Like, I just know that about me. When I'm moving into a transition, I'm more likely to slip into like a 4. And so coming up with strategies and tips and stuff before, when I'm in a more calm, regulated, able to attach it state at like a 2 has really helped. So then I move, instead of going to a 5 and then waiting a really long time to move back up, now I'm more at like a a 4 and then back to a 3 and then a 2. And now with even more progress, I'm like maybe a 3 and then back to a 2.
And I think this is an important example because we look at neurodivergent parents parenting neurodivergent kids. And this is a comment we get a lot on our like tips and tricks type videos is this is so hard when you are also a neurodivergent parent. So we talk about being able to like hold space and guide our kids through these things and how difficult it is when we have our own struggles as neurodivergent parents. And so I'm thinking of that I have the same issue with transitions, and I do actually like I listen to a song in my car or like a podcast like as a way to help transition my brain coming home. But the thing too about coming home is like my kids want to see me and they're like very like in my face the second I get home. And so it's like I want to honor their needs in the moment and be responsive to them while also honoring my own needs. And it is so tricky. Or maybe if I've had a hard day and I'm feeling emotional and I know that they've had a hard day, it like amps me up walking into it because it's like, okay, I'm tired and exhausted emotionally and I may be in a 4, almost a 5, and then I've got like big emotions. Plus, sometimes the time of day I get home at is like bedtime. And so it's like that's the whiniest time of night anyway. I just naturally because they're tired. And so it's taken a lot of like awareness on my part. Like and this is where this is so important if you have a neurodiverse family, which my whole family is at this point. So how can I support myself as the parent so that I can support my child?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So those are the 5 rungs of the ladder, how to cultivate emotional health and understanding.
And next week we'll talk about kids specifically.
Bye.
Thanks for coming to Mindful as a Mother podcast. If you'd like more of us and Mindful as a Mother, you can find Paige at Instagram at Parenting with Paige and Lindsay at Linds_Adams LCSW. Find us on TikTok, Instagram, and in our Facebook group, Creating Community and Smashing Parental Stigma, Embracing Mindful Motherhood and Positive Parenting. Thanks so much and see you next time.